My name is Joanna Hart. I was once a nurse by profession, now I'm something else entirely. Not because I wanted to be, because I had to be. It started on a quiet morning in early September. The kind where the air hangs heavy, and everything feels like it's waiting to shift. My husband David was pouring coffee. He joked about how he finally fixed the fence post that had been leaning for 2 years. I smiled. I remember laughing just once and then the mug dropped. The sound of ceramic on tile was loud, final. And by the time I reached him, his mouth was moving without sound. His eyes were wide and wild, but there were no words. His entire right side slackened. I called 911 without panic, just muscle memory. I knew what was happening. A massive stroke. The hospital confirmed it. Long road ahead, they said. Limited speech, they warned. He might never walk again. I stayed every night. Never left his side. I whispered things to him, reminders of who we were, what we had built. He squeezed my hand sometimes. That was enough. We lived on David's family land. 8 acres in rural Tennessee. His parents left it to him. A 2-bedroom farmhouse with a rusted tin roof and a porch swing we used to fall asleep on during stormy nights. I loved it, not because it was beautiful but because it was ours. Every nail, every crack, every apple tree was planted by him or his father. 3 months later, the rehab center said they'd done all they could. It was up to me now. So I brought him home. Quit my job. Turned our den into a care unit. Installed a hospital bed. Bought the oxygen machine, learned how to clean his feeding tube. I lived in scrubs. I smelled like antiseptic and sadness. Then Mark started showing up. David's younger brother. The charmer. The one who once called me the hired help at our wedding dinner. He hadn't visited in years. But now he was everywhere. Showing up with store-bought casseroles and fake concern. First, I let him help. I needed 5-minute breaks to breathe. But he started asking questions. Do you think David would have wanted to keep this house in your hands? Are you sure the land titles are still accurate? You know, it might be easier if we consolidated things under my name. Just temporarily for taxes. I said no. Nicely at first. Then firmly. His smile didn't reach his eyes after that. One night, I caught him watching me from his truck parked at the edge of the gravel driveway. He didn't leave when I turned the porch light on. Just sat there, engine running, window cracked. Staring. 2 weeks later, I noticed David's pills had changed. They looked different. The texture. The color. And David, he was slipping. Slurring more. Confused. Shaking. It wasn't just the stroke anymore. I kept a backup bottle in the linen cabinet, something the pharmacy had sent on accident months ago. When I compared them, they weren't the same. I drove straight to the pharmacy. The technician took one look and said, "These aren't even active medication. They're sugar capsules. Placebos." There were only 2 people who touched David's medication, me and Mark. That night I didn't sleep. I sat beside David's bed and held his hand. "You trusted the wrong people," I whispered. "But I won't." I installed a camera in the living room, discreet, buried in a dusty old smoke detector. Let them think I was tired, distracted, weak. I wanted them to think that, because I had just started collecting evidence. I stopped letting Mark near David after that. Made excuses. "David's tired today. We've got it handled. No visitors for a bit." He pretended not to notice. But I could feel the shift. The way he lingered by the fence line. The way he still parked at the edge of the gravel drive, just close enough to be seen, just far enough to claim innocence. I kept my head down and eyes open. I collected every pill bottle. Replaced them all. Bought 2 safes, one for the real meds, one for decoys. I let Mark see the decoys just to see what he'd do. He stopped asking how David was. He started asking how the land was titled. "Just wondering," he said casually one day, leaning against the porch rail. "Dad left this place to both of you, didn't he?" "No," I said. "He left it to David. Everything was put in a trust when we got married." He tilted his head like a confused dog. "You sure about that?" I didn't flinch. "Absolutely." The next day, someone broke into the shed. Nothing stolen. Just rifled through. Papers, old boxes, tax records from years ago. I knew what they were looking for, the originals. But they weren't in there. They never were. Because 3 months earlier, after David's first night home, I'd made copies of every deed, every notarized trust document, every doctor's note proving David had full mental capacity when we signed the paperwork. And I'd locked them away in a fireproof envelope, hidden behind the old vacuum cleaner in our coat closet. David had insisted we do the trust. If something ever happens, he'd said before the stroke, I want it clear. You're the only one I trust. His voice was still strong then. His handwriting steady. He signed every page in front of 2 witnesses. A lawyer notarized it. He even recorded a video, something the lawyer suggested, where he spoke directly into the camera and said, I, David Hart of sound mind, place everything in Joanna Hart's name as trustee of our living trust. Mark never knew about that video. But he would. Soon. 2 days later, I found a typed letter in our mailbox. No return address. You're dragging this out. You're not family. You're temporary. You'll regret making this harder than it had to be. It wasn't signed, but the paper smelled like his cologne. That sickly woodsy stench he thought made him seem important. I took it to the sheriff's office. Unsolicited threat, I said. Just to have it on record. They jotted it down, but I could tell they didn't think it was serious. Family drama, the deputy mumbled. No one ever sees women like me coming. That night, David had a good moment. His eyes followed me around the room. He squeezed my hand twice. I showed him the video on my phone, the one he'd made months ago before the stroke. He blinked slowly. His eyes watered. I think he remembered. I whispered, You did good, baby. You made it easier for me to fight. The next morning, Mark filed a petition with the county courthouse, trying to have the trust invalidated. He claimed David was not of sound mind when the papers were signed. He said I was manipulating him, isolating him, and siphoning his estate. That's when I knew. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. I hired the only lawyer I could afford. A woman named Claire Beaumont from Nashville.
No nonsense.
Deep Southern steel in her spine. She took one look at the documents, the video, the pill bottle I saved, and said, This ain't just inheritance games. This is criminal. She filed a formal response. Requested a court hearing. Set the date. I started preparing. Printed every file. Labeled every folder. Charged the hidden camera footage. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to bury him. But then, something happened I didn't expect. Adult Protective Services showed up at my door. Anonymous report. Neglect. Malnourishment. Unhygienic conditions. The woman at the door was polite. Clipboard in hand. Professional. She walked through every room. Touched every surface. Took notes. Talked to David. Inspected my routine. Opened my fridge. Watched me change his bedding. After 2 hours, she closed her folder. Off the record, she said quietly. This is one of the cleanest care situations I've ever seen. Whoever reported you was trying to hurt you. She didn't say Mark's name. She didn't have to. I knew. He had just tried to break me. And instead he sharpened me. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the envelope taped to my storm door. No name on the front. Just a red wax seal. Like something out of a cheap thriller novel. Inside was a business card. Daniel Cross, land consultant. Specializing in distressed property acquisition. Handwritten on the back. Mark said you'd be ready to sign next week. Let's make this easy. I stood there barefoot, rain pooling at the steps, my hands shaking not from fear, but fury. He was getting bolder. He thought the courts would take time, and in the meantime he'd pressure me to fold. He wanted to wear me down. But Mark didn't understand something crucial. I had nothing left to lose, and that makes a woman like me dangerous. That night, I walked the perimeter of the property with a flashlight and a bat. Not because I thought he'd show up, but because I wanted him to. Let him see I wasn't scared anymore. Then came the barn break-in. The lock had been cut. Clean. Precise. Someone had rifled through the filing cabinet. Not the valuables, just old folders. Nothing was stolen, but papers were left scattered like they'd been searched in a hurry. One of David's father's old journals was ripped open, pages torn. That was when it hit me. Mark wasn't just trying to challenge the trust. He was trying to rewrite history. I filed a report with the sheriff. Again. Tire tracks matched the kind marks lifted Ford left when he peeled out of our driveway weeks earlier. They still told me to keep documenting. So I did. Every day. Every call. Every stare from his truck. Every strange letter. Every petty move. 3 weeks before the court hearing, my lawyer Claire called. He submitted new evidence, she said. Claims David rewrote his will and named Mark as executor. My stomach dropped. That's impossible, I said. She paused. That's what I thought too. But you need to see it. I drove into Nashville the next morning and walked into her office. She handed me a manila folder. Inside, a forged will, dated 3 months before David's stroke. Same notary seal we used for the trust. Same lawyer's office address. Only, David would never have done this behind my back. He hated lawyers, hated paperwork, and he loved things being in order. Claire was already 10 steps ahead. I called the notary listed, she said. She's never met your husband. Said her stamp's been misused before. Forgery. Flat-out fraud. And now it was criminal. Still, I didn't feel relief. Because I knew Mark. This wasn't the end. He'd come harder now that I'd caught him. And he did. 2 nights before the court hearing, I woke up to something wrong. I smelled copper. Something metallic. I stepped out onto the porch with a flashlight and froze. There was a deer. Dead. Slumped across the porch steps. Its throat was slit. A bloody handprint smeared across our front door like a threat scrawled in silence. I dropped the flashlight. My breath turned to ice. I didn't scream. I went inside. Locked the doors. Called the sheriff. They came. Took photos. Took the body. Looks like intimidation, one deputy said. But hard to prove. I didn't tell David. He was stable. Alert. But I couldn't let him carry that weight. Instead, I stood in the kitchen and loaded every folder into a canvas bag. I printed every photo. Every notarized document. Every email. Every pharmacy report. Even the stills from the video footage. I placed them in a binder labeled, "The day I burned the bridge for good." Then I made a second binder. Identical. Because I knew the man I was dealing with. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in all black. Not for drama, for focus. For steel. For the part of me that had died in the silence of hospital rooms, in the lies whispered behind my back, and in the stench of blood on my porch. I wasn't there to play defense. I was there to end it. Claire met me at the courthouse doors, crisp and calm as always. "We've got him," she said. But I didn't smile. I didn't relax. Because I knew men like Mark, cocky, self-righteous, born with the delusion that they couldn't lose. He wasn't going to go quietly. And he didn't. He showed up in a rumpled gray suit, no tie. His greasy hair slicked back like a bad game show host. He didn't have a lawyer anymore. That part made me blink. Claire leaned in. His attorney dropped him last week. Found out about the forged will. Pharmacy report too. Apparently, Mark lied to him about what he had. Said the original deed was in his glove box. "Let me guess," I muttered. "It wasn't." Nope. The courtroom was small. Just a few rows of benches, a ceiling fan that creaked like an old boat, and a judge who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. But when she walked in, a woman in her 60s with a sharp jaw and zero tolerance in her eyes, I felt something settle in my chest. This was someone who had seen through men like Mark before. Mark opened his mouth first. "Your Honor," he began with a syrupy voice, "I've been wronged. I've been pushed out of my family's legacy. My brother wasn't in his right mind when he signed those papers. And she," he pointed at me, "has isolated him and manipulated his wishes." He talked for 10 minutes. Cited no real evidence. Just accusations and wounded pride. Then Claire stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we're going to make this very simple." And she did. One by one, she laid out the truth like a surgeon with scalpels. First, the video of David pre-stroke, clearly stating his wishes about the trust, time-stamped and witnessed. Second, the real trust documents signed and notarized months before his medical crisis. Complete with medical evaluations from 2 physicians confirming his full mental capacity. Third, the forged will, and the notary's official affidavit stating she never met David, never stamped those papers. Fourth, the tampered medication, lab results, pharmacy confirmation, still photographs of Mark swapping the bottles on camera, alone in our kitchen. The footage played. There he was, clearly visible, opening drawers, switching containers, whispering to himself. The judge didn't blink, just stared at the screen, then back at Mark. Then came the final blow. Claire pulled out a printed statement from Laura, Mark's ex-girlfriend. She reached out to my client after hearing about the case, Claire said. He did this before. Took money from her parents under false pretenses. Promised a car flipping business. Took $10,000 and disappeared. The statement included screenshots. Texts where Mark bragged about getting dumb people to sign things and claiming land before the ink dries. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I heard the air shift around him. The silence in the courtroom wasn't quiet. It was condemning. The judge closed the file. Mr. Hart, she said, her voice dry as dust, you have not only failed to present a credible claim, you've presented enough questionable activity to raise concerns of criminal conduct. This trust is valid. Your petition is denied. With prejudice. Then she leaned forward. And you should be worried about more than losing this case. Claire exhaled. I felt my knees loosen for the first time in weeks. But it wasn't over. Not for Mark. 3 weeks later they came for him. Sheriff's deputies, 2 cruisers, no sirens. Just quiet authority. Mark was hauled out of his rented trailer in the next county over. Shirtless, barefoot, and stunned. Not like a man wrongfully accused, like a man who never believed anyone would actually touch him. But the DA had seen enough. 2 felony charges. Tampering with medication. Forgery of legal documents. And under Tennessee law, the tampering alone was considered attempted elder abuse with intent to defraud. Claire called me the same day. They're charging him hard, she said. No deals. Not this time. I thanked her and hung up, then turned to David. He was in his chair by the window, his favorite blanket draped over his lap, eyes tracking the trees like he used to when we'd sit on the porch in our younger years. I told you I'd handle it, I whispered. He blinked. Once. That was all I needed. The news spread fast through the town. The same neighbors who once gave me polite, pitying smiles at the grocery store now looked me in the eye and nodded. Not all of them apologized, but enough did. Then came the trial. It wasn't big. Not the kind of case that gets live coverage or crowds in the gallery. Just a plain courtroom, a judge with a cold stare, and a jury of 10 men and 2 women who looked exactly like the people Mark used to manipulate. They showed every video clip, played the recording of the notary, had the pharmacist testify in person, brought in Laura, who stood tall and firm and fearless, recounting how Mark had swindled her father, then ghosted her for months. And when the DA played the footage of him whispering, "Now it's all mine," as David lay collapsed on the kitchen floor, I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just watched the jurors' faces change. That line was his undoing. It took the jury 54 minutes to convict. 7 years. No parole for the first 3. But the punishment didn't stop there. The county seized his assets, what little he had, froze his accounts. Laura sued and won. Then 2 others, people I didn't even know, came forward with stories of Mark taking money for fake business deals. He left behind scorched earth. And I made sure he had nothing to return to. A month after sentencing, I received a letter from him. County lockup stationery. Addressed to Joanna Hart. I opened it. Read the first 2 lines. You ruined me. I hope you're proud. I didn't finish it. I folded the page, lit a match, and burned it in the sink. Then I grabbed a spade and walked out to the garden, the same one David and I had planted every spring. I dug a new row, turned the ashes into the soil, and for the first time in almost a year I breathed. Not because it was over, but because I had one. By the time spring came around again, the porch steps had been replaced. The bloody stain was long gone. The deer, the court, the cameras, they all felt like echoes in someone else's story. But they weren't. They were mine. David was improving. Slowly. His right hand twitched when I read to him. He could hum now, low, shaky, but it was something. Some mornings he'd look at me like he remembered everything, like all the pieces were still inside him, even if the words weren't. That was enough. We planted that season. I rebuilt the garden myself. I dug every trench, turned every row, seed by seed, memory by memory, and I mixed in those ashes from the letter Mark had sent, as a reminder. Revenge, when rooted in love, can grow something clean. Neighbors started dropping by again. Real ones. Old friends who'd avoided me while the rumors swirled now showed up with jam jars, offers to mow the lawn, quiet apologies they didn't know how to word. I didn't hold it against them. People believe what's easier. But they never questioned me again. One day, the notary who'd helped us originally, her name was Marilyn, stopped by out of the blue, brought a pie, said, "You fought harder than most. I've notarized hundreds of trusts, Joanna. I've never seen one defended with that much proof, that much heart." I smiled, but I didn't say much, because by then words felt too small. But redemption? Redemption was loud. Redemption was the clean snap of tomatoes from the vine, the rasp of David's knuckles brushing against mine, the porch swing creaking under both our weight again, the neighbors waving instead of whispering. Redemption was peace earned by fire. Then months later, one final reckoning. I received a package from Claire. Inside was a copy of the judge's final ruling.
Official, sealed, permanent.
Along with a handwritten note. You were never just his wife, Joanna. You were his guardian, his fighter, his sword. I framed the ruling and hung it by David's bedside. And on the first day of summer, he surprised me. He reached for it. He didn't say anything, he still couldn't. But he touched the frame, looked at me with clear eyes, and mouthed something I hadn't seen in over a year. "Thank you." I nodded, and whispered back, "We're safe now. It's ours." I kept my promise.